Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that absolutely fascinates me about the ancient Romans, their jewelry. Not just because it was beautiful, though it absolutely was, but because it told a story about who you were, what you wanted people to believe about you, and honestly, how you were feeling on any given day. Roman noblewomen lived in a world where every choice mattered: what they wore, how they styled their hair, which rings they put on, which bracelets they chose. It was all communication, silent, constant, purposeful communication. Before you settle in, go ahead and like this video if you're into ancient history and fashion, and drop a comment about what mood you'd be in if you had access to ancient Roman jewelry. Now let's step back into Rome and explore the intimate connection between emotion, mood, and the glittering treasures that adorned the bodies of noblewomen who wielded more power through their appearance than many people wielded through armies. A Roman noblewoman's jewelry collection wasn't just an accumulation of beautiful things. It was an arsenal, a carefully curated set of tools that told a specific story depending on which pieces she selected on any given morning. Each ring, each necklace, each brooch carried meaning. Layers and layers of meaning that only those in the inner circles of Roman society fully understood. Take the ring, for instance. Rings were not mere decoration. They were status symbols, mood indicators, and statements of intent all at once. A noblewoman might wear her wedding ring on the fourth finger of her left hand, a simple band that declared her married status. But that same woman might slip on a signet ring when she needed to handle business matters, when she was about to negotiate, when she wanted to project authority and capability. The signet ring was different, heavier, more ornate, carved with symbols and designs that spoke to her family's power and influence. Wearing it meant she was entering a different mode. She was done being ornamental. She was ready to be formidable. The weight of it on her finger was like a physical reminder. You are powerful. You have authority. You represent your family's name and legacy. Every time she moved her hand, every time she made a gesture, that signet ring caught the light and spoke volumes. It was a declaration without words. It was mood as material object. And then there were the rings designed purely for pleasure and mood. Rings set with precious stones, emeralds and sapphires, rubies so deep they looked like captured wine. Some rings had multiple stones arranged in elaborate patterns, each stone catching and reflecting light differently, creating the effect of tiny trapped fires on a woman's fingers. When a woman put on a ring like that, she was telling the world something. She was celebrating. She was feeling bold. She was in the mood to be noticed and admired. She was saying yes to beauty, yes to luxury, yes to taking up space. But if she was in mourning, if she'd suffered a loss, those rings would come off. Every single one. She might replace them with simple bands or remove rings altogether, letting her hands appear naked and vulnerable to the world. The absence of jewelry was itself a kind of statement. Jewelry became the language when speech might fail. It announced, before she even entered a room, what kind of day she was prepared for, what kind of woman she was being that day. The women of Rome understood this deeply. They moved through their lives like actresses changing costumes, and jewelry was one of their most crucial props. Except these props were real. They weighed something. They had cost something. They meant something. Necklaces and pendant pieces carried even more elaborate meanings. Some women wore long strands of gold that almost touched the waist, declaring wealth and status so obvious it felt almost obscene. But these weren't worn every day. They were for special occasions, for triumphs, for moments when you wanted everyone in the room to understand exactly where you stood in the hierarchy of Roman society. More intimate were the shorter necklaces, the ones that sat close to the throat and collarbones. These pieces seemed personal somehow. A woman might choose a necklace with a particular pendant, maybe a charm or amulet, when she needed protection. Romans were superstitious people, and noblewomen believed certain stones and symbols offered divine protection. An emerald might protect against illness. A pearl might bring luck in matters of the heart. A crescent moon might ward off evil. A small owl might grant wisdom. When a woman fastened a protective necklace, she was making a spiritual choice. She was whispering prayers into the metal, asking the gods or the universe for help. She was telling herself, and anyone paying close attention, that she needed help, that she was vulnerable, that she was, despite all her status and power, still human and still afraid of the things that could go wrong. These protective necklaces were often the pieces worn in private moments, when a woman was alone or with her children, or in the company of other women she trusted completely. They were almost like portable sanctuaries. But when she wore a necklace purely for seduction, purely because she wanted to draw eyes and attention to herself, she chose differently. Longer chains that drew the eye down, pieces that glinted and caught light as she moved, gold that seemed to warm against her skin. These were the necklaces of a woman who was feeling her power, who was in the mood to be desired, who wanted the world to see her as irresistible. Earrings, too, played their part in this daily performance of self. Small, delicate earrings might be worn on quiet days, days of introspection. Large, ornate pieces with hanging stones or pearls were for days when a woman wanted to command attention. Pearl earrings could signal purity and virtue, qualities that mattered in Rome's rigid social structure. But rubies and deep stones, those were for women feeling bold, feeling sensual, feeling ready to challenge expectations. A noblewoman choosing her earrings in the morning was making a decision about what version of herself she wanted to present to the world. Brooches and fibulae served a practical purpose, holding clothing together, but they were also incredibly intimate fashion statements. The design of a brooch could be simple and elegant, or elaborate and showy. A woman might pin a simple brooch when she was in a contemplative mood, when she wanted to fade into the background, when she was processing grief or dealing with difficult thoughts. But if she was feeling energized, if she was planning to attend a social gathering where she wanted to shine, she might choose a brooch encrusted with gems, something that caught and scattered light with every movement. Bracelets wrapped around the wrists and forearms like promises. They were visible, constant, impossible to ignore. When a woman felt strong, when she was in the mood to project confidence and capability, she wore heavier bracelets, multiple pieces stacked together. The weight of gold on her skin seemed to strengthen her somehow, seemed to make her more real, more present. But on days when she felt delicate or wanted to appear fragile, vulnerable, open to protection, she might wear a single thin bracelet, something almost gossamer thin, a piece that suggested refinement rather than strength. Anklets, worn beneath the stola but visible when sitting or reclining, could be hidden or displayed. They were almost like secrets. A woman might wear an anklet as a private reminder of her own sensuality, something only she and perhaps a trusted servant knew about. Or she might wear one as a deliberate display, a subtle signal to those in the know that she was aware of her own desirability. The process of selecting jewelry in the morning was ritualistic. A noblewoman would stand in her home, her slaves around her, and make choices. Which mood am I in today? Which version of myself do I need to be? Do I need to project authority? Wear the signet ring? Do I need to feel protected? Put on the protective charm necklace? Do I want to be seductive? Choose the longer chains, the dangling pieces, the stones that catch light. Do I want to seem pure and virtuous? Pearl earrings, simple brooches, subtle jewelry. It was a language so sophisticated that modern people with our Instagram feeds and selfies might not fully appreciate it. But Romans understood. Every piece told a story. Every choice made a statement. And for women who had limited actual power in a patriarchal society, jewelry became one of the most effective tools they had for controlling how they were perceived, for managing their own narrative, for telling the world who they were on any given day. Jewelry in Rome was not distributed equally. The materials alone told stories of incredible wealth and social standing. Gold was the realm of the truly elite. Not just gold rings, but gold necklaces that weighed enough to require practice wearing them. Gold bracelets and anklets and earrings and brooches. Wearing gold said you had access to resources most people couldn't even imagine. It said your family had power, influence, money that went beyond mere comfort into absolute luxury. A woman wearing significant amounts of gold jewelry was making a statement about her place in society that couldn't be mistaken. But there was something about gold that also suggested certain moods. A woman in a good mood, a celebratory mood, was more likely to pile on the gold. A woman in a somber mood, dealing with serious matters, might wear less ostentatious pieces, or might choose silver or other metals instead. Silver was interesting because it occupied a middle ground. Not quite as prestigious as gold, but still valuable, still a marker of wealth and status. Silver jewelry could be beautiful and elaborate, with the same intricate craftsmanship as gold, but it seemed somehow less aggressive than gold, less domineering. Silver was cooler to the touch, which mattered in the hot climate of Rome. It had a quieter presence. It caught light differently than gold. A woman wearing silver rather than gold might be signaling that she was in a thoughtful mood, a more reserved mood, a mood where she wanted to be noticed for her intelligence and refinement, rather than for sheer wealth. Maybe she was in a contemplative place. Maybe she was dealing with something serious and wanted her appearance to reflect that seriousness without flaunting it. Bronze and copper, used more in earlier periods but still seen in some contexts, could almost be seen as self-deprecating choices. A noblewoman wearing bronze wasn't claiming the highest status. She was being practical, perhaps. Or perhaps she was in a modest mood, a mood where she wanted to be accessible rather than unapproachably elite. Bronze had a warmer tone than silver, a more intimate quality. It suggested someone comfortable with who she was, someone who didn't need to prove herself to everyone around her. Precious stones embedded in jewelry added another layer of complexity to the language. Different stones were believed to have different properties, different meanings. Emeralds were associated with fertility and health, with growth and renewal. Sapphires with heaven and virtue, with truth and clarity. Rubies with passion and power, with courage and vitality. Each stone carried its own symbolic weight. A woman choosing to wear a particular stone wasn't just making an aesthetic choice, picking something pretty to match her outfit. She was making a spiritual or emotional choice. She was casting a vote for what she needed in her life. She was aligning herself with certain properties, certain energies. If she was feeling weak and needed courage, she might choose ruby. If she was feeling scattered and needed clarity, she might choose sapphire. If she was hoping to have a child or simply wanted to feel the fertility and potential of life, she might choose emerald. The stones were like silent wishes worn on her skin. Pearls occupied a special place in Roman jewelry, almost a category entirely of their own. They were the ultimate symbol of feminine virtue, of purity, of desirability. The most famous pearl story in Rome involves Cleopatra dissolving a massive pearl in wine just to show off her wealth and power. The pearl was said to be worth an entire kingdom. That single gesture, dropping something so incomparably valuable into a glass of wine, proved her point. She had access to things beyond the imagination of normal people. Pearls could signal innocence and youth, the way mothers dressed their daughters in pearl earrings to announce their unmarried, untouched status. But pearls could also signal sophistication and wealth when worn by older women accumulated over decades of marriage and motherhood. A noblewoman wearing pearl jewelry was tapping into incredibly complex associations. She was claiming virtue, yes, but also claiming access to the most luxurious items in the world. She was saying, I am pure, but I am also powerful. I am innocent, but I also know exactly what I'm doing. The soft luster of pearls seemed to work differently than the harsh glitter of diamonds or the deep richness of rubies. Pearls had a gentler power, a more subtle authority. They suggested someone comfortable enough with her own status that she didn't need to shout about it. The craftsmanship of Roman jewelry was extraordinary. Metal workers were artists. They created pieces with delicate filigree work, with inlays of semi-precious stones, with designs that required months of painstaking work. When a noblewoman selected a piece of jewelry, she was often selecting not just a piece of metal and stones, but hours and hours of someone else's skilled labor. She was wearing evidence of human dedication and mastery. In a way, every piece of jewelry was a collaboration between the woman wearing it and the artisan who created it. The artisan poured their skill and vision into the piece. The woman wearing it brought that vision to life, made it meaningful through her choice to display it. And her choice to display it on any particular day was affected by her mood. If she was feeling generous, feeling confident in her taste and her status, she might wear a piece that showcased incredible craftsmanship, that invited people to admire not just her wealth, but her discernment. If she was feeling insecure, if she was in a defensive mood, she might choose simpler pieces, or none at all. Some noblewomen had jewelry so extensive, they needed entire rooms to store it. Jewelry boxes made of precious wood, lined with linen, organized by type and material. The sheer volume of options meant that selecting which pieces to wear was genuinely difficult. It was like standing in front of a massive closet every single morning and having to decide who you were going to be that day. Which mood would you present to the world? Which version of yourself was appropriate for the day ahead? If you knew you'd be hosting a dinner party, if you knew there would be competition, if you knew other women would be evaluating your wealth and status and taste, you'd make different choices than if you knew you were going to be home most of the day, dealing with household management and attending to family matters. The emotional weight of jewelry choices cannot be overstated. When a woman was grieving, she removed her jewelry. She moved through the world stripped of adornment, and that absence was eloquent. Everyone who saw her knew immediately that she was in mourning, that she was experiencing loss. The jewelry that was meant to make her visible and powerful was deliberately set aside. When she was celebrating, when she was in love, when she was feeling triumphant, she wore more jewelry, more elaborate pieces, pieces that caught light and drew eyes. The jewelry grew heavier, more golden, more demanding of attention. And when she was in ordinary moods, when she was simply living her life, she wore moderate amounts of attractive but not overwhelming pieces. A thin gold necklace, a couple of tasteful rings, a brooch that was pretty but not ostentatious. Jewelry became a language for all the emotions and moods that a Roman noblewoman was supposed to keep silent about. Roman women existed in a world of strict expectations. They were supposed to be modest but beautiful, virtuous but desirable, obedient but capable. These were contradictions impossible to fully resolve, but jewelry offered a way to navigate them. Through jewelry, a woman could present different sides of herself at different times. She could be modest one day and bold the next. And she did it simply by selecting different pieces. She could claim virtue and claim power simultaneously, which in the outside world might seem impossible. Jewelry gave her permission to be complex, to be contradictory, to be fully human with all the moods and emotions that entailed. Mood jewelry, in a sense, was therapy. It was a woman's way of processing her own emotional reality. By selecting a piece that matched how she was feeling, a woman was acknowledging her feelings. She was giving them form and substance. She was letting herself feel them rather than suppressing them, as society often demanded. A woman who put on a bold piece of red jewelry when she was feeling angry was allowing herself to express that anger, even if only through her clothing. A woman who fastened a protective amulet when she was feeling vulnerable was acknowledging her own humanity, her own fear. The jewelry was small, perhaps, but it was real. It mattered. It gave women a tool for self-expression in a world that didn't give women many tools at all. The social reading of jewelry was incredibly nuanced. Women understood these signals. When another woman walked into a room, other women immediately assessed her jewelry and understood her mood, her status, her intentions. If a woman wore her finest pieces, everyone understood that she was making a statement, that something important was happening. If a woman wore simple jewelry, everyone understood that she was in a modest mood, perhaps that she was grieving or dealing with serious matters. If a woman wore pieces that were beautiful but not outrageously expensive, everyone understood that she was comfortable in her status, that she didn't need to prove anything. Jewelry was a code, and Roman noblewomen were fluent in it. Men might not have understood all the nuances, but they understood the broad strokes. A woman covered in gold and jewels was expensive to maintain. She came from power. She was worth negotiating with, worth courting. A woman with modest jewelry might be more approachable, less threatening. A woman with protective amulets might be signaling that she needed care. A woman with seductive jewelry might be signaling openness or interest. The choices weren't necessarily conscious, not always deliberate calculations, but they were real. They communicated. They expressed. They told stories. The morning ritual of choosing jewelry was also a moment of solitude, of private reflection. A woman in her private chambers, maybe with only her most trusted slaves, could be herself. In that moment, before she put on her public face, she could acknowledge her real mood. If she was feeling sad, she could sit with that sadness while she selected a modest piece of jewelry. If she was feeling powerful, she could luxuriate in that feeling while she chose bold pieces. The jewelry was the bridge between her private self and her public self. And the choice of which jewelry to wear was the moment she decided who the world was going to meet that day. There's something profoundly modern about this, actually. We think of our own emotional expression as very contemporary, very 21st century. We post our moods on social media. We wear our mental health on our sleeves. But Roman noblewomen were doing something similar, in their own way, through jewelry. They were telling the world how they felt. They were using material objects to communicate their internal states. They were curating their appearance to match their reality. It's not so different from what we do now, really. We're just using different tools. Jewelry is the ancient equivalent of our Instagram captions, our tweets, our carefully curated feeds. It's the way we tell the world who we are and how we're feeling. The legacy of mood jewelry didn't end with Rome. Throughout history, women have used jewelry the same way. To express, to communicate, to claim space and power and beauty in a world that didn't always make room for those things. Victorian women wore mourning jewelry, dark and somber pieces that announced their grief. Medieval noblewomen wore jewelry that signaled their marital status and their husband's wealth. Modern women wear jewelry that makes them feel confident, that boosts their mood, that tells other people something important about who they are. The basic impulse hasn't changed. We still use jewelry as a form of communication. We still choose pieces based on how we're feeling. We still believe, somewhere deep in our hearts, that the right piece of jewelry can change how we feel about ourselves and how the world perceives us. Imagine a Roman noblewoman standing in her room, surrounded by her enslaved attendants, about to face the day. She reaches for her jewelry, and in that moment, she's not just selecting objects. She's selecting a mood. She's selecting a version of herself. She's making a choice about who she's going to be and how the world is going to respond to her. She chooses confidence or modesty, boldness or grace, openness or protection. She communicates her internal state through the external language of gold and pearls and precious stones. And in doing so, she claims a kind of power that few women in her society had access to. The power to control her own narrative. The power to present herself as she chose. The power to be complex and contradictory and fully human, even if only through the language of jewelry. By the time a Roman noblewoman emerged into the world, fully adorned and ready to face whatever the day might bring, her jewelry had already done its work. It had helped her process her own emotions. It had given her a way to express her internal reality to the external world. It had boosted her confidence or signaled her vulnerability, depending on what she needed. The pieces she wore weren't just beautiful. They were functional. They were therapeutic. They were communicative. They were honest. And in a world that demanded that women be so many contradictory things simultaneously, that honesty, however small and however expressed through material objects rather than words, mattered. It mattered deeply. Roman jewelry wasn't about vanity, not really. It was about power and expression and the complex navigation of being a woman in a rigid society. It was about using the tools available to you to claim space and to communicate and to be seen and heard, even if just through the glitter of gold and the quiet eloquence of carefully chosen pieces. Every ring, every necklace, every bracelet was a small act of rebellion, a small claim of agency, a small assertion of selfhood in a world that didn't make much room for such things. And that's the real story of how a Roman noblewoman chose her jewelry to match her daily mood. It wasn't about following fashion rules or proving wealth, though those things mattered too. It was about using whatever tools she had to tell her truth, to express her reality, to be fully and authentically herself. And in doing so, she was doing what humans have always done. She was reaching for beauty, for meaning, for a way to be heard.